unidentified mystery material that's been collected in multiple sites around the world.
Whoa, that's crazy. So they're scouring the ocean floor to try to get them. That's why the aliens are going to come out.
Something is happening, not just in the skies, but behind closed doors. Whistleblowers are talking, footage is surfacing, and now it's not conspiracy theorists making headline, it's physicists, ex-CIA, and the Pentagon's own insiders. On the world's biggest podcast, secrets were spilled that nobody expected. Joe Rogan didn't laugh. Tucker Carlson didn't flinch. Because if what these people are saying is true, we're not just being watched, we're being tested. And this time, it's not about lights in the sky. It's about who left them here and why. The secret they slipped on Joe Rogan. It started like any other episode. Joe Rogan, microphone in hand, sipping from his whiskey glass, leaned across the studio toward a man most people had never heard of. But within minutes, the room shifted. Because this guest wasn't a jiu-jitsu coach or some wild-eyed theorist. He was Dr. Harold Puthoff, an 88-year-old physicist who spent years inside the classified guts of the US intelligence community. And what he said wasn't just a casual comment, it was a confession. More than 10 alien craft. That's how many Puthoff claimed the US government has recovered since the 1940s. Not one, not two, more than 10. Some were the result of crashes, others, he suggested, were left intentionally. Donations, he called them, as if someone or something had handed them over without a single explanation. Now, Rogan has hosted wild guests before, everyone from flat earthers to Bigfoot hunters. But this wasn't that. Puthoff wasn't a man trying to go viral. He was a former CIA scientist, one of the minds behind America's remote viewing program, the very project where the military trained psychic spies to see behind enemy lines using only their minds. As strange as it sounds, the program existed. It was declassified, and Puthoff wasn't some washed-up weirdo. He was still consulting on black projects. So when he said Roswell was the real deal, that there was wreckage taken to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and examined by top-level analysts, Rogan didn't interrupt. He just leaned closer. Because here's where it gets disturbing. Puthoff wasn't just telling stories. He was part of an official advisory group tasked with answering a single question. What happens if we tell the public the truth? They explored every angle. 60 possible side effects. Financial chaos, civil unrest, religious upheaval, tech companies suing the government for withholding technologies that could have changed the world. And after months of assessment, they came to one recommendation. Do not tell. Keep it quiet. Forever. Why? Because this wasn't just about science. It was about what Puthoff called existential shock, the kind of revelation that rewires how people think, how they pray, how they vote, the kind of secret that breaks more than it reveals. And that wasn't all. Puthoff floated another possibility. What if these craft didn't come from space? What if they weren't alien but ultra-terrestrial? Not from another planet, but from Earth. Just not ours. Maybe from deep oceans, or ancient civilizations buried in the mountains. Maybe even a breakaway civilization that's been here longer than we have, hiding in plain sight, surfacing only when the time is right. And here's the thing, he wasn't alone in thinking that. Over the years, other government insiders have echoed the same ideas. Luis Elizondo, head of the Pentagon's secretive A-tip program. Christopher Mellon, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense. Even members of Congress. They've all hinted at the same pattern, that the government knows more than it's telling, and that the real threat might not be from the stars, but from somewhere much, much closer. So how did we get here? How did a topic once ridiculed on late-night television become a subject discussed in Senate hearings and whispered about by presidents? It all started with the footage. In 2017, 3 Navy videos were leaked. The so-called tic-tac, gimbal, and go-fast encounters. The objects moved in ways no known aircraft could. No wings, no exhaust, no predictable trajectory. Just impossible speed, angles, and acceleration. The Pentagon eventually confirmed the videos were real, and suddenly UFOs, and now rebranded as UAPs, or unidentified aerial phenomena, weren't just a fringe obsession. They were an official mystery. But while the videos ignited public interest, the real story was happening off-camera. Behind closed doors, briefings were being held, military pilots were coming forward, aerospace engineers were digging through declassified documents. And now, on Rogan's podcast, the people once sworn to secrecy were finally speaking. Not because they wanted attention, but because the clock was ticking. In one segment, Puthoff compared our understanding of these crafts to chimpanzees looking at a smartphone. We might see the shape. We might press a button, but we have no clue how it works. That is how advanced this technology is, he said. And the implications are staggering. Think about it. If there really are recovered craft, if these technologies can manipulate gravity, distort time, or shift dimensions, what does that mean for everything we think we know? For our physics, our history, our place in the universe? And more importantly, why now? Why are all these disclosures happening in the last few years? Why are high-level insiders suddenly willing to risk their reputations, even their lives, to speak out? Could it be that something is coming? Or worse, has something already arrived? Whatever the truth is, it didn't come through a blurry video or a late-night Reddit post. It came from one of the deepest corners of the American intelligence system and landed right on the Joe Rogan Experience. And if that's where the first secret came out, wait until you hear what happened just days later in a quiet desert town in California, because that's where things start to move from theory to undeniable. What's happening in 29's Palm Sa? While Joe Rogan's studio echoed with the words of a former CIA scientist claiming the US had recovered alien technology, something strange was unfolding far from the spotlight. Not in a major city, not at a military base, but in a dusty, quiet town that most people couldn't find on a map, 29 Palms, California. If you've never heard of it, you're not alone. Nestled in the Mojave Desert near Joshua Tree, this place is known more for its isolation than its headlines. It's the kind of location UFO researchers call perfect ground. Clear skies, minimal light pollution, and best of all, it's right next to a major Marine Corps base, one of the largest in the country. And that's where it gets weird. On the night of April the 27th, 2025, at approximately 10:27 p.m., a lone visitor staying in a rented cabin on the edge of the desert looked up and saw something that didn't belong there. According to their statement filed with the National UFO Reporting Center, one of the largest civilian organizations tracking sightings across the United States, the witness described a hexagonal-shaped object hovering silently above the desert floor. It wasn't just the shape that was strange, it was glowing. Not with the flickering red and green lights you'd expect from a drone or aircraft, but with a steady, pulsating white-blue aura that radiated from its edges, brighter than the moon, yet completely silent. And the most unsettling detail? It didn't stay one shape. The object morphed in mid-air, shifting from a hexagon to a perfect circle before simply disappearing. No noise, no trail, just gone. The entire sighting lasted about 15 minutes. The witness claimed to have full visibility the entire time. Their phone captured some shaky footage, which quickly made its way online. And while it wasn't crystal clear, it was enough to stir heated debate. Some saw a glowing, slowly rotating mass. Others dismissed it as lens flare. But those who knew 29 Palms, those who had seen things before, weren't laughing, because this wasn't the first time. Over the years, there have been dozens of strange sightings in this area. Orbs of light, triangular crafts, even reports from military personnel describing objects that hovered over the base and vanished when approached. But what made this incident stand out was the timing. It happened days after Harold Puthoff's interview aired on Rogan's podcast, the same interview where he confirmed multiple crash recoveries, exotic materials, and the possibility of non-human intelligence already being here. And even more strange, the very same week, a congressional hearing was held in Washington, D.C. on the topic of UAPs. High-level officials, including whistleblowers like Luis Elizondo, testified to the government's lack of transparency and the urgent need for an official civilian reporting system. In other words, as the government was being grilled about secret programs, and a whistleblower was telling the world that aliens may have gifted us technology a glowing, shape-shifting object was floating in the skies over the desert, and no one had an answer for it. But that didn't stop the theories. Some tried to link the sighting to SpaceX, pointing out that a Falcon 9 rocket had launched that same day. But that launch happened 3 hours earlier, and it was in Florida, thousands of miles away. There were no launches in California at the time, and even if there had been, no rocket creates a hovering hexagon that turns into a circle and then vanishes silently. Others suggested drones, but the altitude, brightness, and morphing shape didn't match anything commercially available. And military test flights? No comment, as usual. But here's where things get even creepier. People in the area started coming forward. Not just that witness, others. A local couple who had been hiking in the Joshua Tree outskirts claimed they saw a flash of light above the same location just an hour earlier. A retired Marine who once worked on base anonymously told a blogger that he'd seen lights like that before and that they don't show up on radar. The National UFO Reporting Center flagged the incident as credible, noting the proximity to military airspace, the lack of air traffic during the sighting, and the unusual characteristics described. But they couldn't do much else, because despite all the military presence in the area, there was no official investigation, no press conference, no confirmation, just silence. The witness, frustrated, told a local reporter, "I saw something. I don't care if no one believes me. I know what I saw. It wasn't ours." And this is where the larger picture begins to form. Because 29 Palms isn't just another desert town. It sits along the UFO corridor, a stretch of American land known for high-frequency sightings, stretching from Nevada to Southern California. Groom Lake, Area 51, China Lake, and yes, the military base at 29 Palms. All part of a zone that has, for decades, been linked to top-secret tests, experimental aircraft, and sightings the government either won't or can't explain. So ask yourself this: why do so many of these sightings occur near military installations? Why do they often line up with government disclosures, podcast revelations, or congressional hearings? And why do they always vanish without explanation? Are we being conditioned? Or are these sightings unrelated, just coincidences strung together by our desire to believe? Because the more you look at cases like 29 Palms, the harder it becomes to believe it's all just swamp gas and imagination. We're talking about trained observers, military airspace, isolated locations, high-level discussions, and physical footage, all pointing to something that doesn't follow our rules of physics. And here's the final twist. In the weeks that followed, other strange reports started appearing online, not in the news, in Reddit threads, in private UFO forums, in encrypted chat rooms, people talking about black triangles over New Mexico, silent orbs near Las Vegas, and in all of them, one phrase kept showing up: "It's happening again." So what's happening in 29 Palms? Maybe it was just a one-off, a freak visual anomaly, a misidentified satellite, or maybe, just maybe, it was something else, something we weren't meant to see. And if that's true, if the government is watching too, then the real question isn't what did they see, it's why are they letting us see it now? Because something has changed. We're going deeper into the whistleblowers, the secret programs, and the technology that might not be ours, but might already be in use. Whistleblowers, back-engineered tech, and the threat of disclosure. As the dust settled in 29 Palms, the conversation shifted from distant lights in the sky to something far more unsettling: the idea that we already have pieces of these objects. If the stories are to be believed, what crashed in Roswell wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning. And according to a growing chorus of insiders and whistleblowers, the real secret isn't about whether these unidentified aerial phenomena are real, but rather what's being done with them in private. One of the most credible voices in this arena is Luis Elizondo, the former head of the Pentagon's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, or AATIP. Initially a secretive government unit buried within the Department of Defense, AATIP was responsible for evaluating reports of anomalous aerial vehicles. Not merely strange lights or radar anomalies, but actual encounters with objects that defied physics as we currently understand it. Elizondo, after years of trying to alert higher-ups to the seriousness of these events, finally left his position, but not quietly. His departure was paired with a public statement that the government was not being honest about what it knew, and worse, was suppressing information that the public had a right to see. Following Elizondo's exit, the trickle of information turned into a stream. Other former officials, including Christopher Mellon and David Grush, began speaking out, claiming that the United States has in its possession multiple pieces of non-human technology. Grush, in particular, stirred major controversy when he testified under oath that the government had recovered not only advanced craft, but also what he called non-human biologics. While that phrase alone caused a media storm, what made his claim different was its setting. It wasn't made during a podcast or in a tweet, but in front of Congress, backed by documentation and protected under whistleblower law. As wild as those claims may sound, they're not entirely without precedent. Reports have surfaced for decades, suggesting that exotic materials often described as having unusual atomic structures or unknown performance properties have been quietly studied by private aerospace contractors under government supervision. According to multiple sources cited in independent outlets like The Debrief and Liberation Times, these materials don't behave like anything currently produced by human industry. Some exhibit memory-like properties, reshaping when exposed to heat, while others seem to manipulate gravity or electromagnetic fields in ways that defy conventional physics. That's where the idea of reverse engineering begins to take center stage. If these materials and craft are indeed real, then someone, somewhere, is trying to figure them out. The theory goes that classified programs operating within black-budget funding streams are attempting to extract usable technology from these objects. The public sees cutting-edge drones or experimental aircraft, but some researchers suggest that what we're really witnessing is the end result of decades of trial-and-error engineering based on technology that did not originate on this planet. But even more disturbing than what is being developed is how these programs are structured. According to several whistleblowers, crash retrieval operations and back engineering initiatives are largely conducted outside of traditional government channels. They're allegedly housed within private corporations, shielded by national security loopholes and corporate secrecy. That means Congress can't see them, journalists can't report on them, and the public remains completely in the dark. Why the secrecy? Some believe it's simply about power. Whoever controls such technology could reshape the global military balance overnight. Others argue that it's economic, that disclosure could undermine entire industries overnight, from fossil fuels to aerospace to telecommunications. But perhaps the most compelling explanation comes from the psychological and societal impact that disclosure might trigger. Whistleblowers have described internal Pentagon discussions where advisors warned of mass panic, spiritual destabilization, and even lawsuits from corporations that may have been denied access to breakthrough technologies. A document allegedly circulated among defense contractors in the early 2000s outlined the risks of disclosure, predicting economic disruption, religious fragmentation, and widespread mistrust of institutions. Imagine discovering that your government knew about these phenomena for over 70 years and never told you. The trust lost might be impossible to regain. To complicate things further, the theories about the origins of these craft have started to shift. While extraterrestrial origin is the most widely accepted assumption, some whistleblowers, including Dr. Harold Puthoff, have floated another possibility that these craft might not come from another planet, but from Earth itself. Not our civilization, but a hidden one. This theory, sometimes called the ultra-terrestrial hypothesis, posits that an advanced species may have been here all along, living deep in our oceans or in remote regions of the planet, remaining hidden until now. To some, it sounds far-fetched, but the sheer number of sightings reported over water and near mountain ranges gives the idea just enough credibility to keep it alive. If that seems like a stretch, consider this. Former Lockheed Skunk Works director Ben Rich was once quoted as saying, "We now have the technology to take ET home." Whether he meant it literally or not remains unclear, but it's phrases like that from people in high positions that keep this conversation going. Which brings us back to the present. Why now? Why are these whistleblowers coming forward at this moment in time? Some suggest it's because public interest has finally reached a tipping point. Others believe that rogue insiders, frustrated by the decades-long secrecy, are forcing the issue. Whatever the reason, the narrative is changing, and fast. Podcast platforms like Joe Rogan's aren't just entertainment anymore, they're becoming the main stage for voices too controversial for mainstream media. Whether you believe what these whistleblowers are saying or not, one thing is undeniable. They're raising questions that the government has no clear answers for, or perhaps more accurately, no willingness to answer. And while the public is being told to stay calm and wait for further study, sightings are still being reported. Strange objects are still appearing in military airspace. And whistleblowers continue to insist that the truth, whatever it is bigger than anyone expected. In the next chapter, we take a closer look at what this alleged technology might actually be capable of, and how it might already be affecting developments in private industry. If you thought the McMurtry Sperling's upside-down drive was the pinnacle of engineering, think again. The future might already be here. Reverse engineering, hidden breakthroughs, and the corporate cover-up. If the claims from whistleblowers and intelligence insiders are to be believed, the greatest technological advancements of the 21st century might not have been born in Silicon Valley, but buried deep inside hangars and underground vaults far from public view. The idea that secret government projects are experimenting with alien materials once seemed like pure science fiction, but now, with credible voices like Luis Elizondo and David Grush testifying under oath and hinting at non-human craft and recovered technologies, the line between fiction and classified reality is beginning to blur. And if that's true, then someone, somewhere, is not only hiding these secrets but actively profiting from them. At the heart of this theory lies the concept of reverse engineering. If non-human vehicles have been recovered, whether they crash-landed, were discovered intact, or were even, as Dr. Harold Puthoff suggested, gifted to us, then the most logical step would be to take them apart and figure out how they work. That process wouldn't be simple. In fact, many whistleblowers describe it as one of the greatest engineering challenges in human history. Imagine giving a modern laptop to a Roman blacksmith and asking him to replicate it. That's how far ahead this technology is rumored to be compared to ours. Despite the difficulty, there are whispers that some progress has been made. Over the past few decades, strange breakthroughs have emerged in military and private aerospace sectors, technologies that seemingly leapt ahead of known development timelines. Consider the advent of stealth technology in the late 1970s, or the sudden appearance of metamaterials and energy-based weapons programs. While official explanations cite advanced research and military investment, there are those who suspect these innovations may be rooted in something far older or far more alien. Insiders claim that some of these programs are not even run directly by governments, but instead by private defense contractors operating under extreme secrecy. Companies like Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, and Raytheon have long been associated with advanced black projects. The idea is simple, but chilling. By outsourcing the study and development of recovered non-human materials, governments can insulate themselves from public accountability. Congress cannot subpoena what it doesn't officially acknowledge. And with the classification buried under layers of proprietary ownership and legal protection, these programs become virtually untouchable. The people working on these programs, according to several reports, are often unaware of the full scope of what they're studying. Engineers might be assigned to study the shape of a single component without ever knowing its origin. Others might be told that the material is a prototype from a foreign adversary rather than something non-terrestrial. This compartmentalization keeps leaks to a minimum, but it also prevents any single person from understanding the entire system, a design some believe that is entirely intentional. What's even more unnerving is the suggestion that this technology is already being used in the real world. Some of the most cutting-edge propulsion systems, energy weapons, and even exotic materials seen in aerospace prototypes might not be the result of decades of human trial and error, but scraps of something else, studied and quietly replicated without public knowledge. These ideas have long been the domain of fringe theorists and conspiracy circles. But when former Pentagon officials start echoing those same claims with a straight face, they can no longer be ignored. So how does this all stay under wraps? The answer lies in a blend of intimidation, ridicule, and selective transparency. For years, those who spoke out about UFOs or alien craft were dismissed as cranks or attention seekers. Even pilots and military personnel were discouraged from reporting sightings, fearing they'd be grounded or transferred. This culture of silence allowed the truth to remain hidden in plain sight. Only now, with government-sanctioned hearings and a softening public stance, are the floodgates beginning to open. But even now, the pace of disclosure is frustratingly slow. Despite compelling testimonies and growing media interest, there remains no conclusive admission from any government agency that they possess non-human technology. Instead, we get vague promises of further investigations, heavily redacted documents, and the creation of new offices like ARO, or All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, whose job it is to investigate unexplained aerial phenomena. Yet, for all their official-sounding mandates, these institutions seem to be operating with one hand tied behind their backs. Many observers point out the striking coincidence between sudden UFO-related announcements and scandals in unrelated government departments. They wonder if these disclosures are being used as distractions, strategically timed to redirect public attention. Still, others believe that certain factions within the military-industrial complex are resisting full disclosure because the consequences, legal, financial, and existential, are simply too great. If it were proven that private companies had possession of alien craft and denied that knowledge to the public for decades, the lawsuits alone could bankrupt entire industries. Shareholders would demand answers, nations would question military alliances, and the public, already cynical about institutions, could finally lose all faith in the system. That, according to some insiders, is the real reason disclosure is being throttled, not because the truth is too strange, but because the consequences are too expensive. There's another wrinkle in this tangled web, the theory that not all of these programs are purely scientific or technological. Some researchers claim there's a deeper, more esoteric layer, one involving consciousness, human perception, and even spirituality. They believe that understanding the recovered technologies requires not just physics, but psychology, that the craft might be somehow responsive to thought, or capable of manipulating reality itself in ways we don't yet comprehend. This idea remains controversial even within the UFO community, but it has quietly gained traction in defense circles. Some reports even suggest that experiments in this area have already begun. Whether or not that's true, it's clear that the stakes are high. We're not just talking about advanced aircraft or material science, we're talking about the future of energy, propulsion, communication, and even biology. If this technology exists, and if it's already being studied, then we may be standing at the edge of a paradigm shift that will redefine what it means to be human. What happens if full disclosure actually takes place? What does society look like when the world is forced to admit we are not alone and that we've known for a very long time? The final disclosure. For decades, the phrase full disclosure has been tossed around like a distant dream, an abstract hope for the day when governments would finally admit what so many suspect. But few have seriously stopped to ask, what would happen if it actually came true? Let's say tomorrow, a top government official walks to the podium and confirms that we are not alone. For over 70 years, recovered crafts have been quietly studied behind closed doors. That corporations have worked hand in hand with intelligence agencies to reverse engineer alien technology. That, yes, some sightings are real, and yes, they're not made by us. The first thing to shatter would be trust. Decades of denial would be exposed, and millions of people who were mocked or discredited would suddenly be vindicated. Citizens would demand answers. Lawsuits would flood the courts. People would question how much else has been hidden in the name of national security. Religions might split in interpretation, some seeing confirmation of divine design, others confronting an existential dilemma. Science would have to evolve quickly, adapting to new paradigms in physics, biology, and energy. And governments around the world would scramble to coordinate a response, hoping to prevent mass panic while maintaining control. But perhaps the biggest impact wouldn't be societal. It would be personal. People would look up at the sky differently. They would question their place in the universe, their priorities, their future. And for many, the real fear wouldn't be the visitors. It would be the idea that someone knew the truth all along and said nothing. So now you know what's really being whispered in the shadows. Whistleblowers are risking careers, maybe even their lives, to tell a story that sounds unbelievable until you realize how many are saying the same thing. Do you believe the truth is already out there, buried under decades of silence? Or are we still waiting for the final piece of proof? Let us know what you think in the comments. Hit like if you want more stories like this, and subscribe for deeper dives into the hidden world beneath the headlines. Because this story, it's just getting started.